Welcome to the Compassion Podcast, brought to you by the Global Compassion Coalition.
Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to this Global Compassion Coalition hosted panel on compassionate politics. Together with our highly esteemed guests, we will be exploring what political systems and politicians themselves can learn from the science and practice of compassion, and how we as a movement together can do our bit to ensure those lessons are heard and adopted. And doing so feels more important now than ever before. Across the world, we are witnessing the retreat of democracy, a rise of right-wing extreme populism, global crises like climate change, war, and endemic poverty, which demand new forms of leadership that can see and go beyond party and national tribes and short-termist decision-making. And this year, we have quite a unique opportunity to provoke change. Over 50 countries will be holding elections, and I've read somewhere that means that more than half of the world's adult population will be invited to vote. Just imagine if those votes were cast in favour of compassionate change. So to help us move from just imagining to actually doing, I am delighted to introduce you to a stellar lineup today. And I'm going to ask each member of our panel to briefly introduce themselves, and then we will move into the discussion. So Jennifer Nadel, are you able to go first?
Thanks so much, Matt, and it's a privilege to be with you all. My name is Jennifer Nadel, and I'm the co-director of Compassion in Politics and also the director of Compassionate Politics at Stanford Center for Compassion, Altruism, Education Research at the medical school there.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Mampela.
I'm Mampela Rampili. I'm a South African, and I chair the Global Compassion Coalition. I was brought up in a country whose politics were anything but compassionate. And so, given where we are in the world today, compassionate politics are really called for.
Thank you, Mampela. To.
Yes, hello, and thank you again for inviting me for this really inspiring topic of compassionate politics. And I'm really honored to be here with such a wonderful co-panelists. My name is To Havin To. It's a Vietnamese name. I'm currently the founder and the director of the Eurasia Learning Institute for Happiness and Well-being, and also board member of the Global Compassion Coalition. I've been the director and the co-founder of the Gross National Happiness Center in Bhutan. And before that, I have been working for many years with the International Committee of the Red Cross in war zones and conflict areas. And it's really these experiences of war zones and conflict areas that has led me to get very interested in the idea of compassionate politics as a structural answer to these terrible conflicts that we're witnessing even right now as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you, To. And I think we're still waiting for Marianne Williamson to join. So I will let her introduce herself when she's with us. So on to the discussion. Compassionate politics can obviously mean so many different things, but I think it's helpful for us to start with thinking about two particular aspects. One is, how do we make policy? And the other is, what does that policy do? So I'm going to turn to Jennifer first and just ask you to define for us what you think compassionate policies look like, and what the focus of a compassionate politician might be.
So for me, compassionate politics is about the alleviation of avoidable suffering. We know that life involves inevitable suffering, but much of what people experience as suffering is due to systemic failure, to inequity, to injustice, to unequal distribution of resources, to oppression. And so compassionate politics is designed to ensure equity, to alleviate suffering, and to ensure that we don't enact laws that actually cause harm on those in the most vulnerable circumstances. We have a situation in many countries across the globe where laws are knowingly enacted that are going to cause harm to citizens, and that just has to be completely against what the purpose of politics should be. Politics should be about the protection of citizens and ensuring that everyone has the capacity to flourish and has their basic needs met.
Thank you, Jennifer. And To, as Jennifer has obviously picked up there, having governments which really focus on people's well-being and on their basic needs is clearly such an important integral part of compassionate politics. You've done some work on this through the concept of gross national happiness. I wonder if you could tell listeners a little bit about that and why you think it matters not only in what it delivers, but also what it signals about politicians' intentions.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think one of the first dimension of gross national happiness is focusing as an indicator of the development of a country on the happiness and well-being of all the people and I would like really to emphasize that, all life forms, because we live in a time where we cannot have a competition between humans and other life forms. We need to see it as one unity, as one ecosystem. So instead of focusing in a very one-sided way on development, economic development, and usually this development only serves the few and not the whole, really measure as a main indicator of development of country the happiness and well-being of all the people. And this entails dimensions like psychological well-being, like their physical, of course, physical needs being met, but also things like inclusion, so that it's really about everyone, like mental well-being, community vitality, and the such, so that it's really about focusing the collective attention from a very one-sided perspective of economic development to refocusing on the common good, which is happiness for all people and well-being for all life forms.
Thank you, To. Wonderful. And we might come back to sort of the actual implementation of that soon. But Mampela there, To was talking about, I suppose engaging all people and representing all people. And I know from your fantastic work with Reimagine South Africa, such an important part of your commitment to compassionate politics is the engagement of citizens. So why does that matter? To start with, if that's not too obvious a question, and why do you think, certainly in certain communities, we're tending to see a disengagement from politics by the citizens, by the citizenry?
Thank you, Matt. Politics, for me, reflect the values that are dominant in society. What we have in terms of indigenous science and knowledge is that we as human beings are part of the web of life within which we are interconnected and interdependent. So there is no such thing as disengaging from politics, because to be human is to be political, because politics is about how we structure our relationships. And so I believe that human beings who have supposedly opted out are people who have been humiliated, who have been unheard, which is why in Reimagine South Africa, what we do is to sit around, like our ancestors is around a circle, and really engage on what matters for you. Because it's in being all the time conscious of how each one of us matters, how each life form, as Toro says, matters. And if we are conscious of that, we cannot be disengaged from politics, but also the kind of politics we will have will, by definition, be compassionate, because they will be informed by what we have generated as an internal journey of really being conscious of who we are as human beings.
And Mampela, I suppose, just coming back to that, how do you approach that work, especially in a climate where people will feel maybe distrustful of institutions or organizations or of each other. And in a climate where people can feel so divided from one another, what skills, processes are needed to bring people back together and do that reimagining that you've been doing?
It starts with my having to reflect on my own journey and sharing with others. And so our reimagined circles are healing circles. So we work with people in urban, in rural areas, not by saying, why do you vote or not vote, or who do you, no, but just saying what matters to you and how does what matters shape how you engage with life as an individual, as a family, as a community, and as part of the larger society. And of course, in the end, as part of life and as part of the world. And we have found that question, how does being human make a difference in how your understanding of what it means to be human, make a difference in how you relate to others, relate to yourself, relate to your family, relate to your community, and how you relate to the cycle of life around us. And so by taking people on a journey of inside out, we have found that people who were totally disengaged become very excited that my voice matters and I can shape how I respond to my environment, and in the process shape that environment in a way that becomes more compassionate. As we say in my continent, your humanity, ubuntu bakho, then shows up. And so it's very closely related to what Toa was talking about in terms of gross domestic happiness. We don't call it happiness, we talk about it as consciousness, and living a life as a self-liberated, conscious human being who therefore becomes an agent of change for the better.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mampela. And I think Marianne has joined us. So Marianne, I invited everyone to do their own introduction so you can let people know what you want to about yourself and the work that you're doing. So do you want to just say a couple of quick minutes about who you are, and then I'll put a question to you to bring us back to where we are at the moment. But over to you, Marianne.
Thank you. Hey, Jennifer. Hi. I am Miriam Williamson, and I am running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. And everything that Mampela was just saying is, well, certainly, obviously, it's core to what anyone who would be on this call already believes. And it's really core to my campaign. Everything that she was describing is, I think we would all agree, natural to us. We are born. You can see it in little babies. I have an 8-month-old grandchild. And it's so obvious, you know, that we have within us an internal nature, which is hardwired for connectivity. That's how the species survives. We have developed over the last really over more than a century, a political and economic system, particularly in Western civilization, that mitigates against our own natural knowing. It has lured us into the external world, away from the principles that govern consciousness. And I think that there is a critical mass of people who recognize that this has fractured us. It has disconnected us from who we are, from any sense of higher being, and from each other and from the earth. And I know in American politics, I believe that it's an imperative, and I would think, you know, I can't speak for other countries, but clearly it's not just an American issue, that politics cannot be left out of the transformational conversation. Because when you have economic and political realities that are based on extraction and exploitation, extraction from the earth, extraction and exploitation of workers, of communities, this is in direct contradiction to how we are hardwired. For love, connectivity, and so forth. So I think what's going on is a great revolution. on this planet a revolution of consciousness, a revolution of knowing. And in the particular corner that I inhabit, it's a revolution that always also includes a revolution at the ballot box. This is a big deal in the United States because the economic and political powers that dominate here are deeply ensconced in the extractive and exploitative, not just perspective, but behavioral patterns, deeply corrupt, deeply putting profits of huge multinational corporate interests before people, before animals, and before planet. And I'm among millions of people in my country, just as there are billions of people, I think, around the world who are doing absolutely what we can to stand for an alternative, to stand strong, and to make a difference. And every vote I get means someone who agrees with all of us on this phone. And I think anytime any of us demonstrate that we believe in the alternative and we stand for the alternative, then we have to hold strong with each other and in support of one another and know that we're going to get there. The planet's going to get there because the species will not survive if we don't.
Thank you so much, Marion, and thank you for being with us. As I said at the introduction, I know that you have to leave early, but we really appreciate you taking the time. And one thing I said in the introduction actually was about the number of elections that we're seeing in 2024. I think it's quite an unusually large number, and of course you are right in the thick of that. And you've mentioned there about the fact that people will get there, the planet will get there, because it's kind of hardwired. I wondered what reception you're getting from the work that you're doing already in your campaign, and also if you've got lessons, feedback from that about what is effective in terms of communicating this kind of vision for a more compassionate world, a more compassionate politics, and what maybe isn't quite so effective.
Well, we had a big night last night because we're winning the Iowa Youth Straw Poll, which is a really big thing in the United States and in the electoral system. Young people, let's remember, guys, 20th century, the Gen Z, that generation, they're not even 20th century people. They have, just like the mindset of the 20th was different than the 19th, the mindset of the 21st is different than the 20th. Mindset of the 20th century, which gave birth to, which spawned this corrupt economic system, is very mechanistic. It's so disconnected from the inner life. 21st century, far more holistic, far more whole person, and the young people they're born into a more holistic perspective, and particularly economically, what I meet here are young people who don't understand why they should have to live their lives at the effect of these bad exploitative economic ideas from the 20th century. They're the first generation to get the full brunt of the pain that this causes in people's lives. So the reaction I'm getting among young people is yes. Because I'm saying what they're saying, which is we've got to cut the cord with the entire neoliberal experiment. We've got to cut the cord with the entire corporate-dominated governing principle. The other people who we get very good response from is older people, because in a system that places your ability to serve it before your own health, safety, and well-being, that system doesn't care about older people. It doesn't care about younger people. So I speak to those who the system doesn't care about. So when they hear me, that's who we're doing well with, younger people and older people. The dispossessed, the marginalized. The problem is that the system, and everybody on this call knows this, the old system that is dying away, it's going to die away through pain or it's going to die away through wisdom, but we all know it's dying. And it's putting up a tremendous resistance. And one of the forms of that resistance in American politics is what's happening in the Democratic Party right now, where they'll do whatever it takes to get somebody out of the conversation that is not convenient to its purposes. Shutting down ballots, not allowing me or my opponent, Dean Phillips, even on ballots, invisibilizing and erasing in the press. That's one of the reasons why I was very excited about the straw poll in Iowa. You just do what you can to get the word out. But I can't, if they don't have you in the mainstream media, people don't even know you exist. So where are you going to get your fundraising from? So we sort of exist on faith and fumes, we just, this little train chugging along. So, but we're in there. And when we're heard by people, everything that is being said on this call is the new mainstream. And I think all of us on this call and all of us in these larger fields of personal transformation need to kind of like take a moment to go, you know what, we've all been working on this for decades. And especially with this younger generation coming up, remember, they were raised by mothers who were talking this way because they were raised by mothers who read the kinds of books that we're all talking about. So the change is coming. It's in a new world is being born. It's just at the same time, the world that's dying is putting up a big fight. So we're in the middle of it right now, all of us. And I see my political circumstances as just a microcosm of what's happening in everything and in every issue that we're talking about.
Absolutely, and getting that message out there is going to have ripple effects that you never know about. One thing there, that Jennifer's coming to you. One thing Marianne obviously has sort of brought up there is both the way that we're dealing with quite systemic level change, which is related to cultural change in politics. How do you start to untangle that when you've got both soft traditions that have been handed down over generations? You've got rules which are quite archaic, at least I know for both of us sat in the UK, that's certainly the case, but is probably true for many. What are the kind of priorities for untying that knot of systemic tradition in politics?
Well, many of us operate in political systems where the rules are defended as tradition, but really they're hiding places for misogyny and entrenched interests. And the sort of rules that govern our political conduct wouldn't be allowed to operate in any school, in any workplace, in any boardroom. We allow behaviours amongst our political class of dishonesty, of insulting, of impugning, of lack of integrity that would not be tolerated in any other professional setting. So one of the ways we start is by having rules that are enforceable. We don't have lobbying. We require honesty. We require integrity. And we also have to dial down the fear. We live in a climate of fear. And what politicians know is that the more fearful they can make a population, the more likely that population is to vote for conservative, patriarchal leaders. We know that from psychological research. And actually, fear is a big liar. What we need to believe in is the power of connection, the power of community, the power of coming together to protect the common good and make sure those changes that Marianne is talking about happen before it's too late.
Really powerful. Thank you, Jennifer. And To also picking up on another aspect of what Marianne was saying, which was about young people and how their receptivity to this message. I know that your own foundation does a lot of work with education in schools, and I just wondered if you might talk a little bit about, I suppose, the culture in education, and in a way, people may want to keep politics out of schools and out of education, but it's there anyway if you have an education system which responds to a culture of competition and conflict and focuses on that rather than on how we create a compassionate cooperative society. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about the work with young people and how that can kind of inform the future of politics that we might see.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think it's very easy for me to connect with what Marianne said when she spoke about this triple disconnection with ourselves, disconnection between people, and disconnection with nature, with the ecosystem, with the planet. And I think, what we are doing with the program called Happy School is basing education on these three reconnection: how to live in harmony and learn to care for ourselves, how to live in harmony with and care for others in society, how to live in harmony with and care for the planet, the ecosystem, and all life forms. And it's absolutely amazing to see how well children respond to that and young people respond to that. And we've been implementing it on a very large scale in Vietnam as the first country who's really trying to develop that. And the response both from teachers, parents, and children has been overwhelming. And I totally agree with what Marianne said, that actually the upcoming generation is naturally part of this movement. Now, the good news is that we have started working together with the PISA survey. You probably know the PISA survey. It's the international program. It's a program for international student assessment, who until now has been focusing only on math, science, and reading, so reinforcing this very one-sided intellectual academic dimension. And now, since this year, PISA will start measuring the well-being, the mental well-being, psychological well-being, and happiness of children and young people worldwide. So that's been a great breakthrough that we managed to get through collaborating with PISA. And I'm very hopeful that once government will realize, at least those in governments who care for children, and I do believe that there are some people who care for children, even in our current governments, that there will have to be a response when they realize how much the current education system is actually really destroying the future of our children. So I think education is a very important place to start to change politics, even though it means only changing it in 10 and 20 years. But, I know we have to start now, but also to take care of the future is very important.
Absolutely, and it's wonderful instrumental work that you have done there, To. So thank you for the work that you and your foundation are doing. Mampela, bringing you into this part of this conversation, which I suppose we're now starting to shift towards the second half around how do we get that change. A lot of work that you have done, again, returning to Reimagine SA, is around mindset shift. And when it comes to a mindset shift in our politics, what is it that we're looking for? And secondly, not to burden you too much with your answer, where do we even start to try and make it happen?
As I said before, and thanks, Marian, for the work you're doing, because I'm a passionate believer that what Margaret Mead said, never underestimate the impact of a small group of committed people to change the course of history. And it's the only thing that has done so. I'm a live example of it. In the 1970s, in fact, 60s, after the political parties here were banned, we grew up in a culture of fear. And this fear was induced in order to keep the majority of people in South Africa, the indigenous people, bonded to the colonial and apartheid mindset. It is when we woke up one day and said, we are not non-Europeans, we are not non-whites, we are Black, we are proud, we are Africans, we are indigenous, we are proud of who we are. That's where it starts. The beauty of it is that work, that personal experience has informed the formation of Reimagine SA. And of course, I'm much wiser now. I know, in fact, that what we were doing there as a small group of people, somehow it was wired into us because of, as Marian said earlier, we were wired to be self-respecting, and that's the basis on which we respect others, to respect the dignity of others because we want our dignity to be respected. But the beauty is that work has informed a school system that Toy is talking about Vietnam and how they're introducing this. There is a school system in South Africa called LEAP schools, which has had an impact beyond the 6 schools because of the networking that the founder, John Gilmore, has done through creating a common web track where people as professional teachers have had to confront their own need for consciousness at a higher level. And finally, I'm in a country which has made a thorough mess of its politics. But guess what, Marian? It is young people, the 18 to 45 year age cohort in South Africa is the cohort that can change the course of history for this country, like we did. And the most prominent young member whom I believe is practicing the kind of compassionate politics we're talking about has managed to mobilize 50,000 young people from rural areas, from the poorest, neglected, marginalized. They are now mobilizing their own families, their own communities through practical actions to address the things that make them feel bad. And so, like Marian, I believe that change is here, is happening. The momentum thereof will depend on us continuing to believe And not only that it will happen in 5 or 10 years, it's happening now too. And what we need is to build on the momentum of small things everywhere, like the connectors in the Global Compassion Coalition. Those are the people who can really help connect us to who we really are, and therefore shift our mindset away from extraction to interdependence and compassion for one another and for the entire web of life.
Thank you, Mampala, and thank you for including me in the young person category there. Very pleased about that. Marianne, I know that you have to go soon. I think still have to go soon. So possibly your last question, but there is an election coming up in America this year, and I think for people sat outside America, it can seem like it's becoming more the conflict is being ramped up, the kind of standards that it is conforming to are dropping. I wondered if you could give us a sort of a brief summary of that feeling in America right now, and where do you think there are threads of hope that it actually might not turn out to be quite so nasty as some people are fearing or predicting?
I don't think what's happening in the United States is that different than anything that has been discussed so far on the call. When you understand deeper dynamics, you are not distracted and waylaid by the particular difference in form that they take in one country or another. By the way, I really want to acknowledge what Jennifer said about misogyny. I didn't even know what it meant until I got into politics, because there are a lot of corners where the shift has already, the new world being born has already allowed for women to have our voice. It's in the political system, certainly in the United States. Remember, we've never even had an American woman as president. So I just really wanted to point that out. But everybody has spoken on this call about what is happening in a way that is just as true in the United States. If you look at the surface level of polarization, that's all a distraction artificially created so that people will not see what the real dichotomy is, and that's between the powerful and the powerless. The power of money, the power of technology, the power of politics, now in the hands of the old, and a younger consciousness. And yes, it is headquartered in the young, just as everyone has said, because they have a greater critical mass within that generation. But it's happening. I don't care if you're 80 or 18, people are getting it. And remember, I mean, look at this call. We're not young, but we've all been holding the space. So this is not that different than any generation. The generation might do it. When I think of my own younger generation, when I was young in the United States, yes, the young, it was a youth generation, but it was, Martin Luther King, the Kennedys, Eugene McCarthy, and so forth, that were holding aloft the vision, which is, of course, why the system killed them. I mean, we all know what happened, and I think the system would rather not go that far now because it makes martyrs of people. They find different ways to get you out of the conversation, character assassination, etc. But American politics is no different than everything that has been said on this call, and I think that it's very heartening to see that this is a global phenomenon, whether you're talking about young people growing up in Western Europe, whether you're talking about young people growing up in South Africa, whether you're talking about young people growing up in Vietnam, whether you're talking about young people growing up in North America or Latin America. That's where a lot of it's going on. So I love that Mampala said it's happening. We're not any longer in a phase of, wow, it's coming. We're in the middle of it right now. So I really appreciate calls like this because, I say to people all the time, you're not alone in this. There is the impression that there are more of the old. Actually, numbers-wise, there's not. Even in American politics, if this younger generation really shows up at the polls, you're talking about 37%. It's a massive change. Baby boomers are, we're moving on. So I think we're all in with this. What's really exciting here is the ways in which we're all seeing the same threads of possibility. And also when Mampala said, small groups, never forget small groups of individuals. I actually had the honor, Margaret Mead's granddaughter, was it her daughter or her granddaughter, Mary Catherine Bateson? I think it was her daughter. Anyway, I met with her many years ago, around 20 years ago. It was almost 30 years ago, when President Clinton was president. So I actually was in the room when she was talking about that concept with an American president. So we know that things take a long time to happen, but we've all been preparing the ground now, and people before us have been preparing the ground now for years. And I think we have, there's a line in the Course in Miracles, happiness is a method of conversion. Let us be happy warriors. Let us be happy warriors, because we know the world's going to go this way. It's just going to go this way through joy or through pain. And let's go through wisdom and through joy and continuing to connect with each other. The Course in Miracles says an idea grows stronger when it's shared. So I'm just honored to have been with you to have the opportunity to share what we're all saying in different ways. It's a symphony. It's the age of the symphony, not just the age of the soloist.
Amen. Thank you, Marianne. And I know that, if you do need to leave, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Wonderful being with all of you, seeing with all of you. I know I leave heartened knowing we're all doing it when we're doing it. Thank you so much. God bless. Send a few prayers over to the U.S. political system.
We'll be thinking of you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Marianne. So coming to you, Jennifer, one thing I suppose that we're sort of grappling with here in this conversation is this new, old, younger, I don't want to say old, but existing generation of politicians. I know from working with you, have done some of that work, going into Parliament, going and meeting politicians who are current politicians and trying to convince them to come on board. And I think that you have to create that space just as much as you have to facilitate and be part of new and younger generations coming through. What do you think is effective when you're trying to sort of bring current politicians round to this newer way of thinking, and how much hope do you have that it can be done on an even bigger scale?
Well, I think what we have on our side is that what we're talking about is the truth. And when I go into the UK Parliament, and we're working with now 100 members of Parliament out of 650, so that's nearly 1 in 6 who've agreed with our fundamental premise, which is to make compassion the guiding principle, much honoured in the practice, but nevertheless stating that intention, is that most politicians come into politics because they want to make a difference. They don't come in to cause suffering and to create new systems of oppression. But what happens is they enter a system and a culture which is designed to perpetuate itself. And very quickly they find themselves having to make really unholy alliances and pacts. They suppress their truth in order to secure their positions so that at some point in the future they can try to achieve the agenda they come in with. But during that process, they become divorced from what they set out to do in the first place. And then their egos kick in and they say, well, this is really what politics requires. It requires tough decisions. And obviously I don't like having to make these unpleasant decisions, but because I'm such a brilliant politician, I will take it on the chin. But what they're really doing is abdicating moral responsibility. And Mampela earlier talked about values, and at the moment we have a politics that is valueless. It is simply about short-term expedient survival so that at some point in the future something good may be done. And that doesn't work. What we need is a politics that's anchored in the values that most of us live by. And, you want a sign of hope. Well, the hope that I have is that most of us hold those values dear in our lives. And we do a lot of polling in Compassion in Politics. And voters still want those traditional values. They take care of their family. Don't throw members out because they've ceased to be of economic value. They worry about the next generation. They don't dissipate their resources without thinking about the impact on those who are to come. So most of us hold those values dear. And we saw it in the pandemic. We saw people risking their lives for strangers. We saw people appreciating the value of each other as humans. And yet the political space is not at the moment paying heed to that. But there are, as Marianne said, there are many of us, and they're the majority of us. We just don't have the organisation, the voice and the resources that those who are currently holding power do have, and that's what needs to change.
And so I suppose moving towards interventions that perhaps even just thinking about we, the GCC, but we, the coalition, we, Compassion in Politics, can make. Mampela, given that's the resources that I mean, I don't want to use terms like opposition, but others with different views may have, what strategic interventions would you like to see groups, individuals starting to make in addition to the fantastic work that we've talked about that is already going on?
I don't think there is any option other than we are the change, and we have to remain the change that we like to see, as Gandhi told us. And so every opportunity you have within your family, within your community, within your church, within the shopping complex, when someone is serving and acts in a strange way. But also, I believe we have the power of the social media, which young people are searching, and what they find on TikTok or on X, whatever, is just garbage. Now, why don't we, again, going back to Margaret Mead, have these connectors of yours, Matt, and the democracy builders of this young man called Songezo Zibi here, who started something called Rise Mzansi, Rise Up South Africa. And it is rising because these young people now have something to talk about other than what fashion or what kind of liquor brand, or it's all about, I want to make my village better. I want to improve my skills so that I can be a better mobilizer, but also be employable and have a livelihood that I can be independent as a person, but within the interdependence of my community and my society. And so, and in the case of the LEAP schools, for example, that I was talking about, these are young people who come from slum areas, the poorest of the poor. It's amazing that after a few weeks of being exposed to these circles of healing as the first period of every day, at the end of the first quarter, those young people are like flowers that have come out of this bud. And when you visit one of these schools, they'll be the ones taking you around and say, this is what we do. And, here are our values. Values? Yeah. These are our values. And it doesn't matter whether you're a whiz kid or whatever. If you are dishonest, if you don't acknowledge mistakes you make, it's not right. And it is your peers who are going to hold you accountable. And so I think to counter this built-in system of exclusion and self-perpetuation, we the people, there are more of us than them. And this is what happened here with the end of apartheid. It didn't end because some Mandela came out and saved us. No, it ended because the great unwashed, who were us at that time as young students, decided if you're a teacher, your teaching method must be self-liberated. If you're a doctor, same thing. If you're a lawyer, if you're wherever you are. So as a doctor, I worked with the poorest people. We didn't talk about politics. We talked about life. We talked about relationships. And we addressed the immediate problems of women losing children and regarding that as a normal process. And those women today, I tell you, they are the community leaders in their places. So it can and is happening.
Thank you, Mampela. And I think taking up that mantle of we the people, this is a poor segue, but I did want to just remind everyone who's out there to please send in questions or comments that you have as we're coming towards the final 15 minutes. We'd love to hear your views and questions that you might have. To, this is hopefully not opening up too big a new topic, but I suppose one of the things that's kind of been going through the back of my mind is that we're talking about quite a different conception of politics and democracy than perhaps we are used to, in that it's very citizen-led, it's alive, it's quite it's definitely devolved, it's down to community level. And is there a problem that particularly I suppose the West has tried to kind of export this version of democracy, which is now actually already out of date because it's failing to deliver the kind of change that young people in particular are demanding on things like climate change and inequality. And I wondered if there's lessons that you're learning from the work that you do in schools about a different kind of politics and a different kind of democracy in particular that new generations are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, I think politics is a lot about, and leadership is really about how do we redirect our collective attention? Because what we are attentive to is what drives our decisions. Now, and I thought what Marion was saying was very relevant. That she said, the big divide, and so that's the discourse that is put forward to hide the reality. And so mainstream media, willingly or not, are doing a lot of that, actually covering up reality by putting forward certain aspects of reality that are not the main aspects. So the question is, how can we redirect collective attention so that we put our attention, therefore our energy, because energy follows attention, to what really matters? And I think direct democracy and participatory processes are a very important part of that. And when I think of gross national happiness, one of the characteristics of gross national happiness is that if you want to do a gross national happiness survey, of course, we have like standard indicators and things like that, but they're not really important. What is important is you have to gather people and ask them, what is important for you? So that we know we measure what matters to the people. What is being measured now by states and organization is not what matters. And the example of education that I give, you measure math and science and reading, but that's not really what makes up the destiny of a child. Because once a child is really motivated, they can learn that. But if we really put our focus on what really matters, what truly is truly human, and I think in the time of AI, education will have to reinvent itself, because a lot of what now is done in exams and so on, machines can do it much, much better than humans, faster and so on. So how do we create environments where our true human nature can come forward? And it has been said several times today, and I think that's really the key. There's no systemic transformation without inner transformation, with a transformation of consciousness. So I think that has to be at the core. And, I'm reluctant to think in terms of we and they, because they are also people. And they might be misled, they might, be in different places, they might be manipulated by systems that are stronger than them. But if we meet people from heart to heart at eye level, no matter who they are, there is always the possibility to get through. So I think if I have a minute, let me share you a little example from Switzerland, because I think Switzerland is quite a nice example. Once I was in the train station in Geneva, waiting for my train to go back home, and then the president of Switzerland came in on the station. She was a lady. It was Ruth Dreyfus. She was the first woman president of Switzerland. And she was waiting for the train with a shopping bag alone. And she walked into the train, and I was in the same compartment. And the train conductor came and asked her, Mrs. President, may I see your train ticket? And she said, of course, and took out a train ticket and showed it to the conductor. That's the kind of connection that we need to have between politicians and people. But what you see normally is politician, it's huge motor car, with hundreds of policemen and helicopters, and so cut away from the reality of the people. But we need politicians who walk on the street and take the trains with normal citizens and get a chance to chat with them.
Great example, Toe. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to some of the fantastic questions we've actually had from the audience. I'm just going to give everyone on the panel a quick warning. The last question is going to be, what one action would you recommend people take from this who've been watching and are eager to start the process of change or be a part of the change that they're probably already involved with? And also, if there was something, a book, an article, TV show, a film, not all of those, just one of them, that you would recommend as well, a sort of further reading or a further browsing I'd love for you to share it. But coming back to the questions, Kate has asked, and I'm going to direct this to you, Jennifer, what is an effective way you have experienced getting buy-in to those that resist?
I think it's about connection. We've talked a lot about connection. It's about talking human to human. You know, we can use our intellects as the equivalent of Neanderthal clubs that we batter each other with, trying to prove that we're more right than the other person. But when we connect on a human level, we create a bridge, and it enables us to row across to the other person's island and see what we're talking about might look like, what their experience might look like. If we were on their island, what would things look like? So it's about personal connection, it's about kindness, it's about respect, it's about self-disclosure, it's about vulnerability, many of the qualities that are not prized amongst our politicians, but are actually the ones that speak to our authenticity as humans, speaking heart to heart.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Mampela, I'm going to send you Patrick's question. Do panelists have a sense of what the leverage points might be for transformative change as electoral processes seem so impervious to attack, with traditional right and left parties offering the same things? I don't know which country Patrick is coming in from. I suppose it will be different, obviously, different electoral systems, different political setups, cultures, but I suppose the heart of the question is, what are the main entry points for this kind of transformative change?
It goes back to people. Politics has been hijacked by parties who are part of this system that removes the concerns, the energy, and the focus of citizens away from what really matters in life, to the big cars and the powerful and all of the pomp and circumstance. The only way we can be able to shift politics from where it is today to where it should be is to discourage this party political structure, which is the them and us. When we go back to our ancient ancestors in Africa, there was consensus politics. That's why politics, in terms of so-called Western democracy, doesn't work in Africa, because African people are wired like the rest of the world. But here, it remained until destroyed by the colonial system in the last 100 years. But consensus politics is what really works. And that is about one of us, first amongst equals, as To was saying, that kind of, and Switzerland is a typical example of consensus politics, where there isn't a dominant party. Every citizen is obliged to participate in making decisions that are important for the canton and for the federation. And so, as I said at the beginning, the changes we are seeking are here, but we are blinded by the bright lights of American politics, South African politics. Politics is about what values we as human beings hold as high, as important, as priorities. And that then would drive the kind of conversations we have that will make the kind of decisions that are for the greater common good.
Thank you, Mampela. And speaking of power and large cars, To, question for you from Martha. Could the panelists address the perspective I heard in the 1990s? Political persons are interested in the allocation of resources and the distribution of power. Is that your impression of what drives people towards frontline politics, or are they incentivized by something else? And also, sorry, To, we've got 3 minutes. So if you keep it to about 60 seconds, we'll have time to just do the final go round at the end.
Well, I guess that, allocation of resources is very much what I said before. It has to do with collective attention. So we allocate the resources to where we are looking at, what interests us. And that's why changing the way we measure development of a country or the organization and so on is so crucial, because it's what we measure is what we're aware of, and what we're aware of is where we will put our attention and therefore our resources, both inner resources and financial and so on, material resources. So I think really the shift in consciousness is the first thing, and the rest can follow naturally.
Really succinct. Thank you, To. Powerful. Okay, so we'll go around quickly. One thing that a comment was asked around, what is the Connectors program? So I'll just do a very short introduction to that. So we, the Global Compassion Coalition, have a volunteers program of connectors across the world. We have about 1,800 people signed up. And really the object of that is to try and create communities of compassion. We have around 55 to 60 groups registered. If you sign up, you then get taken through a step-by-step program for essentially taking action in your community. But crucially, it's all about going back to those human values that we've talked about. It's you identifying the core values that matter to you and seeing how we can have them realized in your local, regional, or nation, depending on how you want to work. So final comments then. We'll start with you, Jennifer.
Thank you. So the action you can take is to sign up to the Connectors program that Matt has just talked about. Connection is absolutely crucial, and becoming an active citizen. Think about what matters to you and find a way of supporting that in your daily life. And I think you also asked about books, didn't you, Matt? And there are two that I'm thinking about a lot. One was written by Marianne Williamson, and I can't remember the title, but you can Google it. It's called The Politics of Love, I think. And it is about this new politics, what it looks like if we put the things that matter most in the centre. And another book is by the Yale historian Tim Snyder, and it's called On Tyranny. And in that book, he outlines how connected we are as humans, as societies, is ultimately the last defense against tyranny. So just to reinforce the importance of connection.
Really great. Thank you, Jennifer. To.
I would like to emphasize the importance of inner transformation and really encourage everyone to start with themselves, because if we transform our consciousness, it will have a direct impact on the people around us, and then politics really starts at home. So start with yourself, and then it has an impact on your family, your community, your colleagues, and so on. In terms of books, maybe 3 books. One is Politics of Beings, The Politic of Being, by my friend Thomas Legrand. Really covers a lot of this. Second book that I would like to recommend is Humankind by Rutger Bregman, it's not about politics, but it's about rediscovering the true nature of the human being, which is basically the basic goodness that we have been speaking about. So it shifts our view from egoistic homo economicus to our fundamental goodness based, really science based. And if I may, for those who want to hear more about gross national happiness, you can read my book, which is called The Culture of Happiness.
Thank you, To. You're very welcome to do that. And adding to the list of books that I need to get and have not yet read, which will not necessarily impress my partner. And Mampela, last word with you. Also, it doesn't have to be books; can be film, TV. But if you've already got a book in mind, that's perfect too.
Mine, really drawing from what you have heard from the panelists today, is all of us have to consciously every day travel inside and make sure that you are directing your energies and your focus on the right things, and mobilize. Mobilize everyone that you encounter, starting with your family, your community, where you work, etc. Book, I'm going to recommend a book written in 1984 by the founder of the Club of Rome, Aurelio Piche, and a Buddhist monk called Ikeda. And this book's title is Before It Is Too Late. the beauty of it is that that's what they thought, and their focus was sparking a human revolution. That revolution is upon us. I see it every day. So please be part of the revolution, and we will be able to alter the politics of the world, one person, one community, one country, one continent, one world at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mampela. What a wonderful invitation to end on. And thank you all for being part of this conversation. It's beautiful to be with you. So I think if there's no further remarks, we'll close up. Thank you all.
This podcast was brought to you by the Global Compassion Coalition. To access more content like this, as well as resources integrating compassion into your daily routine, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and visit our website at globalcompassioncoalition.org.